When Martijn first asked me to give a talk about recruitment technology trends, my first thought was, how is it possible to talk about such a large topic in 25 minutes or less? And Helene has assured me that on 25 minutes, she's going to take this thing off me and kick me off the stage. So I've got to go through this really quick. The way I was thinking about this is, let's create a framework to think about the future. And the framework that I've decided to use is one of relationships. In particular, relationships that are changing across these 5 axes. Changing relationships we have with data, with discovery, with our desktop, with the people who we work with, and also how we make decisions. So I'm going to try and explore each of these particular themes with 2 additional lenses, which is what does it mean for people who create recruitment technology, which is half of the people in the room today, and what does it mean for people who use recruitment technology, which is the other half of the room. So let's get on with it. With data, changing relationship with data. Does anybody in the room remember the term big data? It was a big thing maybe 3 years or so ago, right? No one talks about it anymore. Big data basically was all the metadata we were producing through the social web. So it really was a big bang moment after the social web arrived to us. We were creating a lot of data we did not intend, and lots of recruitment technologies emerged to harvest that data and to produce assets that we can use. And of course, there's a movement against this. GDPR, and I really apologize for introducing this slide, because I'm sure we're all very bored of this topic already. But it's only one of a series of moments that legislation is pushing back against this idea of harvesting data that we did not consent to produce. And that is one of the major ways in which our relationship with data is changing. It's moved from who actually owns it, which in the big data era, we weren't sure, to actually it is the person that produces it, the subjects, us. And what does this mean for the recruitment world, the recruitment technology world? Okay, I will say big tech is not immune. This happened in the Netherlands just this week, I think, where it was Dutch legislation that was actually going for the biggest fish in the water with Microsoft to say, actually, even you're using Microsoft Office data and you're actually collecting it without the consent of the people who are using it. Now you think about that. What is the percentage fine that is applicable for GDPR? 4% of gross annual revenue, I think. For Microsoft, that's probably bigger than GDP of a small country. So we have a very serious moment, really, in terms of our relationship with what data is. And what is going on is that the EU in particular is rowing back on this. It's becoming the leader of the privacy-orientated data rules. Interesting enough, this is not a global or universal way of thinking about it. We certainly know the Americans don't share the idea, although they may follow the EU. We're absolutely certain the Chinese don't care. So we're looking at a future where, in fact, the world may split into several internets and several national web properties. And that has an implication for recruitment technology builders because it suddenly becomes harder to produce a global product. Ownership is shifting. Direct consequences as to what's happening for recruitment technology is probably something that looks like this at a very high level. Previously, you might have created a database where you collected and stored data. Actually, we now need to talk to the people through that data is about. It's database to community transition. We have a rise of software, which I call wake the dead software, right? Any business that creates or harvests data over the past 10 years or so has a lot of moribund and dormant data that we never spoke to. Lots of technologies have emerged over the last couple of years, which are trying to help us have conversations with these people. And they do it through a number of different ways. It could be classic CRM type stuff, sending lots of emails and follow-ups. It could be content-led with learning and development. It could even be automated in terms of a robotic agent trying to have these conversations with the data. It means kind of a return to this thing, the talent community. I think we've seen this emerge over the last 5 years or so, where you have employer-agnostic communities kind of emerging from the disciplines themselves, not led by employers, but led by the people who work for those employers. Probably many of you are part of these communities online, likely on one of these platforms. We have digital embassies, which I think at one point were teetering on the edge, but I think the data privacy change will probably revive these. And these are technologies where essentially an employer might be able to put an embassy on a platform you don't own, but still be able to attract and deal with people who are interested in your brand. Big difference is it's the platform that has the responsibility of managing the data and not you. And of course, we can't get away from LinkedIn. The return of reciprocal networks, the idea that you need to have consistent conversations and relationships with the people who you're tracking. And you have a return of a very old technology. And I accidentally kind of developed this, because it certainly wasn't my idea or plan to create something that became quite a popular way of communicating with people. Newsletters and subscription-based services have been around for a very long time, from the 80s or so. But now, I think, it has become an increasingly important part of how you communicate with people. So, what does this mean for people who use the technology? I think for people in TA, all of this means that our skills have got to diversify. And likely, we're going to have to recruit new types of people into our teams. You need to think less about people that are great at sourcing and extracting information, but people that are really good at drawing information to you, audience building, community management people, individuals that might be strong evangelists or able to push information into the web rather than just extract from it. And we're seeing this with larger organizations, teams that have 20, 30, 40 recruiters or more. Typically, they're not carrying 360 full-cycle recruiters anymore, but they have specific functions that deal with different parts of communicating with this audience. And they're specialists typically without the requirement to fill headcount and fill jobs. I think that's going to be a growing future of what we do in TA. Okay. Second point, our changing relationships with discovery. I think we probably have got a little bit used to Google, but when they first arrived to index the entire web, they gave us something we never had before, which is a single interface that really was the first place we go to discover new things. But if you notice your behavior over the last 10 years or so, you'd probably realize that actually our relationships were shifting. Google was no longer becoming the go-to place for a lot of the things that we discovered. Even for Google, the web got too big for it. And so we went to local properties that were niche providers that did that job for us. If you wanted to buy a ticket, you might go to Skyscanner, let's say. You want to find accommodation, you go to Booking.com, great Dutch company. You want to do different things, you could probably come up with a list of these types of products. And of course, the big one here is our good friends at Indeed, who I know are here today and are good friends of Recruiting Brain Food also. But they've been a spectacular recruitment technology company over the last 10 years or so because they became the one-stop shop for people who are looking for job discovery. They kind of became that Google for jobs, aggregating job data and providing a place where people can discover it. I have to talk about that because Google for Jobs launched in 2017. And that really was a shot across the bows, because when Google actually takes an interest in our industry, that's probably when we need to take an interest in what Google are doing. And it strikes me that Google for Jobs was a clear shot at reclaiming their original mission of indexing and providing useful information for the rest of the world. Very interestingly enough, and very clearly in their strategy, that their biggest competitor in this space, Indeed, was very clearly outside the fence, and remains the case. So what does it look like? We can skip this slide. How does it work? It's very simple. I'm sure you know some of this already, but for those who don't, all it is Google's asking you to reorganize and re-architect your job data in such a way that it's going to be crawled and served by Google for Jobs. It's quite a simple tagging system. There's a schema for it. There's a link for it. If you have a website and you're not sure whether you're doing the right thing, get your developers to check that out. And it's been live, at least in the US, for a year or so. In the UK, it's been live, I think, since January. I'm not sure what the status is in the Netherlands right now. But you know what? Having looked at how it's working so far, I would say it's probably not quite there yet. And the reason why is if you look at the kind of the blue tabs on here, you can see that it says things like apply on Total for Jobs, which is a job board. Apply on JobServe, which is another job board. Apply on recruit.net, which is a job board. And apply on CW Jobs, which is a job board. Now, Google for Jobs was never meant to do that. The original aim of Google for Jobs was to actually service primary data from the home domain of the employer. In other words, it wants to close the distance between the job seeker and the person actually offering the job and get rid of all of that technology in the middle. But you can see what they're doing is simply aggregating what's already out there. So they're kind of doing what Indeed have done, if you like, and simply shoving Indeed a little bit to one side. Now, I've done a little bit of research, not a huge amount, I have to say, but yesterday I kind of went on Google for Jobs and tried to just crawl through it to see whether I could identify a home domain from an employer. I couldn't do it. So it doesn't seem to exist right now. Now, speaking to some of my friends in the industry and getting their opinion as to why this is, they're telling me it is because there are not enough companies that have jobs on their home domain that have actually created the schema for it to be indexed. So in other words, it's one of those problems that will probably ameliorate as time goes on, as more and more companies recognize their need to do this. But apparently, we're not there yet with the market. So Google, at the moment, is simply doing what Indeed have done. What does it mean for us? Probably in the medium to the long term, it should revive the home domains. This is what Google want to point job seekers to. They don't want to point it to another aggregator, and they don't want to point it to another job board. They want to point it to your company that's recruiting these people. So this should mean that you should pay more attention, energy and investment towards your home domains, typically a career page. It revives companies that build these things for you. One of the technology trends that is very interesting is the arrival of e-commerce-like platforms into the recruitment space. And you can see that we've learned a huge amount from how e-commerce works. How do you convert a visitor to your website and make sure this person becomes a buyer? That's something that recruitment didn't know, but e-commerce did. So a lot of those products on the right here are products that essentially take e-commerce mechanics and deploy it onto your career page. Everyone owns an ATS, right? And you can see, and this, by the way, is a very good kind of visual image of how a technology stack might work for HR. But ATSs are almost all focusing on building CRM-type features. Again, I think this is in recognition that discovery is different, and you need to care about people landing on your web page. There's two types of ways this is happening. So ATSs are producing it from their side, and then you have CRMs that are building back out from front to back from CRM first. But it's something that I would say if you're purchasing an ATS product, it's worth thinking about how are they dealing with individuals that are not yet committed to your pipeline. What does this mean for TA and HR? It again means that we need to diversify our skill set. Career pages, online assets have traditionally been managed by marketing. It's perceived to be owned by them. But increasingly, we can see that employer branding and consumer brand may actually be two separate products and two separate streams. So career pages, I think, are beginning to be owned by TAs, especially if they're kind of outputs of an ATS. We need to get better at things like audience analytics, something that I think HR and recruitment has traditionally shied away from. But we do need to understand what these metrics mean. We need to get skills in it. And all of this is about creating a better experience for candidates that ever visit our brand. We can't rely on them just converting and dealing with the people, the 2% of people that do end up buying our job. We need to care about the 98% that bounce and, of course, encountered our brand, and maybe we want to bring them back at some point. Third axis we should talk about is a changing relationship with the desktop. And the desktop, of course, is owned by Microsoft. It has been really since they launched their Office suite. The Office suite, Microsoft's been a really interesting story over the last 20 years or so. At one point, they were an example of a monopolistic business that really controlled every part of our online experience. But then, of course, they got chipped away, particularly by losing the internet, really, by losing the browser war. But it's fair to say that Microsoft has aggressively made efforts to come back. All of these are very significant purchases, and all of them are about trying to get away from the desktop, get away from Office, and become a product that really is software that helps the connected workplace. Of course, the big one here is buying Indeed. 2018, this passed our notice a little bit, but Microsoft actually became the second largest technology business by market cap, relegating Alphabet, which is the holding company for Google, to second place. This came out last week, I think, where Azure was climbing against AWS, which is the dominant cloud service provider. IBM, Google, way in third and fourth place. So you can see this is a very powerful progression by a very powerful company. And we're starting to see this in kind of our working day. Essentially, Microsoft is thinking about the office and the connected workplace. It's thinking about work tools as actually as team tools rather than individual ones. And ultimately, the last point here, they're talking about a vertical integration of an enterprise-wide software where you can't really escape from. We're seeing it now with whoever uses Outlook in the room. You can start seeing Reportive-like features, right? Reportive was a Chrome extension that actually belonged on Gmail. LinkedIn bought that, moved the technology into its platform, killed the Gmail extension, and now you find it reappearing in Outlook. Quite an aggressive move. Resume assistant with LinkedIn. Again, who writes resumes anymore? But when I first saw this, I thought, you know what? That's got to be a precursor for something more than just creating a nice CV. It seems to me what Microsoft are trying to do is maybe create a matching product at the end of it. If they can start creating a standard way to create a resume based on LinkedIn data, then you're starting to build the schema in order to create a very efficient matching product. Haven't seen it yet, but I think it will happen. And of course, LinkedIn Talent Hub, entrance into the ATS space, I think earlier this year. That's a huge move by LinkedIn. You go to any recruitment event or any recruitment conference and you ask who has a LinkedIn license. Everyone sticks their hands up. So I would say, no matter how good or bad LinkedIn Talent Hub is, they have such a strong distribution network that almost always they're going to become a significant competitor to every ATS in the business. What does this mean for us in TA? Again, well, I think we're committed. I don't see a future without LinkedIn, I'm sorry to say. So we need to get good at it, and we need to invest in it. It also means that when we're thinking about hiring people, we need to think about how good they are on LinkedIn. If we accept, for instance, that LinkedIn is the universe for work, then in fact, someone who we're recruiting, whether they're recruiters or non-recruiters, we need to understand what is their literacy on these connected platforms. Maybe the person who's extraordinarily competent by him or herself is no longer the only criteria in which we judge whether this person is a great hire or not. Can this person also bring a network to our business? fourth major axis, our changing relationship with employers. And one thing that was very interesting to note on the research that big organizations have been doing, and I'm talking about Deloitte, Insights, PwC, McKinsey, and so on, we're looking at individuals, we're looking at companies that had been surveyed as to what their future looked like in terms of their workforce demographics. And almost all of them predicted that their non-traditional labor force is likely to increase year on year, meaning people that aren't full-time permanent employees, we're going to recruit more of the people that aren't those. These are flexi workers, gig workers, platform workers, and so on. And I think this is also being pushed by the adoption of consumer tech. We all know that our own kit is better than what the company offers us, right? And this has really helped us understand that we could deploy our services without necessarily being locked into a business or being locked into a certain site. So I think what we have is really a push-pull factor with regards to traditional work. It's being pushed to a certain degree from the employee side, where we want a flexi time. We want to have opportunities to earn revenue in different places. We want autonomy. We want to own our jobs. We want to select the people we work with. And on the other side, from employers, why should we not treat labor like a SaaS service? Why do we need to make a huge capital commitment by hiring someone full-time, all the time? Would it not make more sense to access the labor as and when you need it? So I think even though there's all kinds of political considerations going on with this changing future of work, at the end of the day, we have both sides of the equation are pushing for it. What does this mean for recruiting tech? I've got to skip this slide because time is short. Basically, lots of tools to help you deal with flexi labor. If you're not using some of these, I recommend you should. Why? Because as HR and TA people, you're probably going to be judged on your efficacy in using these products. More tools to assess flexible labor. How do you handle people that aren't in permanent work? Got to fly through this. More tools in managing them. They may not be on site. You may not have ever met them. What kind of comms tools, collaboration tools do we need to use? Well-being, we care about that. I got to move on. And workforce on ecosystem kind of insight. So this is a way in which you can track or understand a little bit more about people that work with you, but not necessarily work for you. And even new ideas that might completely undermine the idea of a company. If you think about what a company is, it's a method of organizing a workforce to deliver to a task. But perhaps there's other ways to organizing workforce to deliver to a task without going through an employment process. So, major things for HR. I think we need to get good at something called total talent management. That means not talent acquisition. That means thinking about you as a talent resource allocator. We need to think about a larger population than just the people that are in employment from us. Okay, I think I've got 2 minutes, so I'm going to fly into this. Our changing relationship with decision making. Of course, I need to talk about AI when you're talking about recruitment technology changes. What is going on is AI has appeared and is appearing not as a sentient individual that's having conversations with us as an equivalent human being, but in fact it's appearing in lots of small different apps that do single use, whether it's scheduling, whether it's assessment, whether it's matching even. These are single-use apps that have some element of artificial intelligence into it. I want to just touch on point number 4 here, the idea of the splinter net. The advantage in AI goes to non-EU countries and territories because we care about privacy too much, and privacy is ultimately going to be a big friction point in our ability as European businesses to create an effective AI solution. Look, the first AI that ever does talk to us will probably speak Mandarin. And that's not a joke. You need to think about what that means. Okay, so we're talking about where can you apply these things. Chatbots, people are using these things right now. Where do you deploy them? I would say FAQ is the first place you want to go there. Augmented messaging, probably some of you are using this already. How do you get better at sending a message to disaffected candidates? I'm getting the signal to get off the stage. Okay, that's fine. I don't want to get kicked off by Helene. That might be quite a spectacular moment. But I think we're nearly there. But I'll just leave you with the final few thoughts. I don't think I'll be able to complete the talk. But ultimately, technology is changing. We, as people who use the technology, need to change with it. And we need to inform that change. Definitely, the wrong thing to do would be to resist it. There's some great companies out there that are helping us, including from this country. So I'd recommend everyone try and embrace this, speak to the vendors that are here today, try some of their products, and see whether we can get ahead of the curve in this future to come. So thank you very much for your time, everyone. Appreciate it.
Donderdag 21 november 2019 vieren we het 5-jarig bestaan van het Recruitment Tech Event. Meld je nu al aan en profiteer tot 1 oktober 2019 van de Early Bird tarieven. Kijk voor meer informatie en om aan te melden op recruitmenttech.nl/event.